Dreaded Ebola virus has certainly found its way into the Nigerian soil, defying all attempts by the government to stop its spread from other West African countries like Liberia, Guinea and Sierra Leone. My guest explains what government is doing to control the spread of the virus at the nation's points of entry. Hello there, welcome to Dateline Abuja this week. I'm Gloria Umezuke. Now, according to the Nigeria Immigration Service, there are over 1,400 illegal routes on the nation's borders created by corrupt elements to infiltrate Nigeria in illicit affairs ranging from drugs, small arms and other criminal activities. However, how prepared is the government to mount these routes to curtail the spread of one of the most deadly viruses? My guest is the Minister of Interior. But up ahead, the outbreak of the Ebola virus has raised questions on the attention paid to the nation's borders. The next report examines the porosity of the Nigerian land borders, which many feared exposed the country to the risk of the deadly disease.
The first reported case of the Ebola virus in Nigeria was a Liberian American, the late Patrick Sawyer, who came into the country through the Lagos airport. Upon the discovery of the virus in Mr. Sawyer, the government announced that it was taking preventive steps to curtail the spread, especially at the borders. Consequently, a health advisory was issued to port health officers, aviation workers, officials of the Immigration Service and the Nigerian Customs.
Some people, against our advice, have even left Lagos primary contacts to go to other cities. We want to begin now also to screen all outbound. We don't want residents of Nigeria, citizens and non-citizens alike. If they have it, please let them stay in Nigeria. We'll treat them in Nigeria. We don't want them to go to other countries and cause problems for other countries.
Nigerian Customs Service, just like any agency of government, has taken proactive steps. In fact, we have been in contact with the Federal Ministry of Health in this regard, and we reported back to the Controller General of Customs, who has made a policy statement alerting all custom formations nationwide to take preventive measures in an attempt to reduce the spread of this Ebola virus.
The vulnerability of border officials lies in the fact that they have first contact with the visitors and the inability of the nation to resolve such trans-border crimes, which has in recent times led to the escalation of terror attacks in the country, questions the preparedness of the border officials to check the spread of the Ebola virus.
They must have, at the minimum, gloves available, gloves and masks, so that if I know sometimes they have to do searches, body searches of those who are crossing the borders. You want to make sure that you are not touching people with unprotected hands, that you protect your hands before you touch people. If possible, we should be able to check temperatures. If when you do a quick check with the back of your hand on anybody and it's warm, we want to be able to check temperatures. And for those who really have recorded high temperatures, those should probably be those that we think about quarantining and not allowing through the border until we're sure the reason for their high fevers.
We were giving the hand gloves and then the face mask, so that you don't breathe into people, and people they breathe into you. I mean, it shields you sort of and protects you from inhaling directly, their breath.
Despite the declaration of a national emergency over the Ebola virus disease, the federal government says it will not close the nation's borders. Hopefully, with effective surveillance at the points of entry, the spread of the virus can be brought under control.
Well, now let's understand the nitty-gritty of the battle against the Ebola virus disease. Joining me now is the Minister of Interior, Comrade Abba Moro. Comrade Abba Moro, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
But let's begin now with Nigeria's borders as it concerns the Ebola virus. You have ruled out entirely the possibility of closing the nation's borders. I mean, I'm wondering what informed this decision against what's happening at the moment.
Well, I think here it's a matter of semantics. I didn't rule out completely the possibility of closing our borders. What I did say, and I want to repeat for the purpose of emphasis, is that at the moment that we were talking, we do not intend to close our borders, but that if it becomes absolutely necessary, we'll definitely close our borders if it becomes a viable option for stemming the tide of Ebola expansion.
When does it become absolutely necessary?
When it becomes necessary, it is when Ebola virus victims begin to increase by their numbers, and when it is evident that these victims are crossing our borders into the country.
Okay, but if you say so, I mean, with the recent experience, what we just heard about, the 17 Ebola patients, although we understand that some have returned from Monrovia Center, is that not enough for us to reconsider this move?
That Ebola victims escaped from their areas of isolation in Monrovia certainly is not enough reason for us to close our borders here. What it means is that we must step up our efforts in ensuring that no more Ebola-infected person crosses our border. And this is exactly what we're doing. Medical officials conducted very strict examination of the circumstances and identified 6 out of the suspected 21 to have actually come in contact with the victim. And so those persons were isolated. And so the medical officials of Nigeria, of the Ministry of Health and other health workers have actually been up and doing and intensified efforts in ensuring that this disease does not spread. And that is the basis for our confidence in asking Nigerians not to panic, not to die before their deaths. Because in the circumstances, the records that are available by the day continue to be very positive on the spread of Ebola. The fact that our medical personnel, our health workers have been up and doing, all stakeholders have been up and doing to ensure that this disease does not spread. And up to the moment that I am talking to you, there is no primary victim of Ebola that is indigenous to Nigeria. It has been the index case of that Liberian American and the persons that have come in contact with him. And at the moment, as I'm speaking to you, within the period that is identified as the incubation period, within the period that this disease is supposed to manifest, several persons have been identified not to actually be infected. Such persons have been discharged, such persons have been let out of the surveillance circle. And so gradually, every effort is being made to contain the situation. And that is the reason that we say, if we are improving on containing the situation, especially with the index case of Sawyer and others that came in contact with him, both primary and secondary contacts, if efforts are being made to contain the situation and people are being treated by various means to ensure that they also get cured, then certainly in the circumstances, there is no reason to panic.
Give us a feel of how equipped the screening centers are at the nation's ports.
At the moment, if you realize that Ebola disease or virus has no vaccine for prevention right now that is known, if you also realize that Ebola disease does not also have a curative medicine at the moment on ground for use, and that the Nigerian environment is undergoing some level of experimentation just like other countries, you want to agree with me that what is on ground now is sufficiently enough to contain the situation. For instance, health workers, immigration officials, drug law enforcement officials, customs officials, and security agencies have been mobilized sufficiently to especially vulnerable ports of entry to ensure that if it is immigration matters, that immigration officials identify people who should not come to the country or come to the country. If it is on the issue of suspicion of Ebola, that our health workers are well equipped and kitted to address the situation. If it is a matter of drug-related issue, that our drug law enforcers are there on the ground. So at the moment, the multi-sectoral approach that was adopted by the federal government, which led to the setting up of a presidential steering committee of all relevant MDAs and ministries, is on ground to ensure that the universal procedures that the World Health Organization has adopted in addressing this issue are adhered to by Nigerians. And so at the moment, this approach is working out. The health workers are at the airports. They are at some of our land borders testing people to find out if symptoms exist on persons of Ebola infection. That is what I mean by sufficiently mobilized to address the situation.
So how did you react to the news that Cameroon suddenly shut its borders against Nigeria?
I think that what Cameroon is doing is just like any other country would want to do in the circumstances. Every country has its own unique situation. Every country has different approaches to addressing problems, even if they are similar. What Cameroon is doing, which is not too different from what Nigeria is doing, is to ensure that people who are suspected of Ebola disease do not cross their borders. Cameroon has closed its borders to Nigeria. Officially, the Nigerian authorities have actually not been informed of the determination or desire or decision of Cameroon to close its borders. But we know by their actions that they have closed their borders to Nigerians, born out of the fear that Nigeria is Ebola infected. We, on our part, have also given specific instructions to our immigration officers to also ensure that unless they are satisfied that Cameroonians, just like any other national of neighboring countries, do not enter the country without due scrutiny, given the circumstances in which we find ourselves. But I want to say that at the moment, it is not a matter of reciprocity. It is a matter of the examination of the facts on ground. And like I said, unless it becomes absolutely necessary, we will not close our borders because of the fear of Ebola, because I insist that closing our borders has its ramifications, and it is not just about containing disease. It has its own economic impact, it has its own political impact, and at the moment, as the big brother of the sub-region, Nigeria will not close its borders to our neighbors unless it becomes absolutely necessary.
All right, hold on to that thought. When we come back, we'll talk more about what's happening in the nation's border post and, of course, the virus. Join us again.